Whatever Happened to Harry Anderson? Judge Harry Stone from TV's Night Court. Harry Anderson was born Harry Laverne Anderson on October 14, 1952 in Newport, Rhode Island, into an unhappy home. His father, a salesman, left him and his mother alone. Anderson moved around a lot in his younger years, living in a dozen states by the time he was 16 years old. He and his mother moved to Las Vegas, where she took a job as a casino dealer, then to Chicago. In Chicago, Anderson spent many days alone in the lobby of the Ambassador East Hotel, a popular spot for men to play cards and gamble. The card players would look after Anderson while his mother was busy, teaching him to play games, make wagers, and perform card tricks. By the time he was 16, Anderson left Chicago to live with his father in Los Angeles. He took up magic as a serious hobby during high school, and joined a club in which he socialized with other future magic stars, like Jonathan Pendragon and Paul Harris. During the summer of his senior year at North Hollywood High School, Anderson visited San Francisco. It was here that he first saw a street hustler performing the shell game. For Anderson it was a revelation. He could put his magic skills to work and earn some real money. He developed his own shell game routine and hit the streets, though according to Anderson he was impeded by not having a crew. He had to hustle against the wall, meaning he had no shills to interrupt the game, to place winning bets when the crowd grew tired of losing, or to look out for the police or trouble. After Anderson had his jaw broken by an upset customer, he reworked his shell game into an act instead of a con. He performed it as a parody of a street hustler and kept a hat out for donations rather than taking bets on where the P was each time. He channeled the men he played cards with in the Ambassador East Hotel in his youth and adopted a persona he called Harry the Hat, a fast-talking conman who was always one step ahead of the audience but still a bit of a nincompoop. After graduating as valedictorian in 1970, Anderson moved to Ashland, Oregon, and opened up a magic shop. During the summers he performed magic at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Each year Anderson would develop a new effect to perform, and he would build his show around that effect. One year he upstaged the festival's performance of Henry V with his own version of the bullet catch, where he had his assistant shoot a gun at him and he caught the bullet with his teeth. When the festival wrapped, Anderson hit the road to perform on street corners all over the country, from San Francisco to Texas to New Orleans to New York City. He would often show up in college towns and perform his entire act in the middle of campus for free, merely passing the hat at the end. Word got around the magic community about Harry's act, and he was invited to perform at the vaunted Magic Castle in Los Angeles. Throughout the early 1980s, Anderson would come to Los Angeles for 1 week each year to perform in the castle before disappearing again and hitting the road to work the streets. In 1980, Anderson finally got his break when a talent manager saw his show at the Magic Castle and asked him to open up for Kenny Rogers in Las Vegas for $1,500 a week. From there, Anderson was booked on The Mike Douglas Show, The Merv Griffin Show, and Saturday Night Live. On his third guest spot on SNL, he performed the needle through the arm on live television for millions of people. The audience roared in revulsion and disgust, even though he constantly repeated throughout the act that it was just a trick, a gag. It didn't matter. This was the genius of Harry Anderson's act, the thing he took from the con men and street hustlers of his youth. If you're going to take their money, make sure they're happy, lest you wind up with a broken jaw. Most magicians told the audience they were doing something magical, and the audience didn't want to believe it. Harry the Hat told the audience he was lying to them, but the audience wanted to believe it was real. Les Charles, the producer of Taxi, had a deal with NBC to make a show called Cheers. He had seen Anderson perform on the street as Harry the Hat and thought that a conman character could work on the show. They signed Anderson to perform on 3 episodes during the first season. His character would show up in the bar and run small cons on the patrons, only to be chased off by the bartender, Sam. It was a small part, but enough to get him noticed by Reinhold Weege, who was producing a show called Night Court. Weege asked Anderson if he'd read for the main character, a young judge who did magic tricks and romanticized the music and style of his parents' generation. Anderson told Weege, "I am this guy. I'm exactly who you've written here." Night Court was a hit, and Harry Anderson became a celebrity. It stuck with Anderson, however, that he wasn't famous for what he knew he was best at. "I was never really an actor," he told WGN in 2014. "I was a magician who fell into a part on Cheers." Not wanting the public to forget about his roots, nearly every time Anderson was asked to appear on a talk show, he performed magic. When he was asked to host Saturday Night Live in 1985, he didn't deliver a monologue. He performed a trick where he ate a live guinea pig. After Night Court was cancelled in 1992, Anderson was given the lead role in a CBS sitcom called Dave's World based on the life of syndicated newspaper columnist Dave Barry. That show lasted 4 years, and when it was cancelled, Anderson no longer wanted to chase acting roles. He was never a fan of Los Angeles. He moved his wife and children to a small town in Oregon and would fly back and forth to film Dave's World. Being famous just didn't suit him. "To me, it's a little bit embarrassing to be in the public eye that much. People start asking me about what I think about the situation in the Middle East. Just because I'm in the public eye. As if I have some kind of knowledge or opinion that matters," he told LH magazine. "It's embarrassing. And after all those years I spent on the street, anonymous, and with intended anonymity, that was a jolt that I never quite adjusted." By 2000 he had stopped acting in TV and movies almost entirely. He longed to return to performing magic. He looked at his former magic peers with envy. While Anderson was acting in sitcoms, Penn Teller, who came up around the same time as Anderson with a similar act and sensibility, had become two of the biggest names in magic and had reinvented what the genre could be. Anderson later bought a building where Lee Harvey Oswald once lived and opened up a nightclub called Oswald's Speakeasy. It was in this club that Anderson started putting his magic act back together, performing his 90-minute one-man show 5 nights a week for tourists and colorful locals alike. He also opened Spade Archer, named for the detective agency from the Maltese Falcon, which served as his appointment-only showroom for his unrivaled collection of carnival, magic, and gambling memorabilia. Anderson quickly became a favorite among the community of street performers and artists that called the French Quarter their home. The reclusive Anderson had found people in New Orleans that he could relate to and often opened up his home to those he dubbed the Quarter Rats. When Katrina hit in 2005, the French Quarter was devastated. Businesses like Anderson's depended on tourists, and they were in short supply after the hurricane. More importantly, for those who made the French Quarter their home, there were virtually no public services in the wake of Katrina. In 2006, Anderson was attacked in the French Quarter, the second time he had been assaulted since living in New Orleans. He and his wife decided to leave the city they loved. They sold their properties and moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where they lived quiet, reclusive lives until Anderson died Monday, reportedly of natural causes. He was 65 years old. He is survived by 2 children, Dashiell and Eva Faye, and his wife, Elizabeth Morgan. Goodbye, Harry Anderson.